when people would ask, how do you believe in God? How do you know God? Um, it was faith. In the beginning, we had miracles. We had Har Sinai. We had Kriyas Yamsuf. So we knew God existed from the miracles, and then we told it from generation to generation, and that's the basis of our faith. Now, recently, what has happened is, um, on one hand, you had 200 years ago atheism pop up, and they started talking about evolution, and and then people were trying to argue against it, whether to say, let's disprove evolution, let's disprove that it's possible or that it's probable. In case you've had that. Um, what's happened is we'd have places like Asia Torah came up and they started giving courses on like the fine-tuned universe theory, showing not just that evolution is not probable, but all sorts of other scientific explanations on how complex life is and why, this wouldn't happen on its own. We've had places like Hidabrut talk about this. Um, we had the book, the Hama'apach, that was put out by Hidabrut, where they're also trying to disprove evolution. They also brought some interesting things from the Talmud, showing that they knew in the Talmud how many stars were in the sky. You could only see about 8,000 maximum. And the Talmud talks about like 10 to the 28. This is like a billion, 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 billion stars, which is very close to the assessment that modern science has today, proving that the Torah is true. Um, so we've had we're some people using science to prove scientifically that God exists. Um, and we have in Asia Torah, we have Gerald Schroeder. He's a scientist that was bringing his proof of the fine-tuned universe. Okay, but the problem is that those proofs were good enough for most people. They weren't good enough for the atheists. The atheists didn't like these proofs. And it's not just that they didn't want to hear it. A lot of scientists would look at these proofs and they said that mathematically they're not good enough. Okay. W One of the main things that they said is that you can't just prove what is the probability of life sprouting up on Earth, right? You have to prove what's the probability of life sprouting up anywhere in the universe. And each time that someone would come along and say, well, look, genetics, in order to mutate and become what we are today, it would take, a huge amount of time. It's completely unlikely. So then what they'd say is that, well, maybe the universe is infinitely big or much bigger than the observable universe. And therefore, maybe somewhere in the world, life sprouted up, and that's us, right? Gerald Schroeder from Asia Torah, he came up with something to try to bypass that. What he showed is that the um, the actual measurements, the constants, the weak nuclear force, the gravity, the electric field, all of those things have constants that if they weren't perfectly aligned, molecules couldn't form, atoms wouldn't hold together. You wouldn't have a universe. You wouldn't have matter. Okay? You might have just energy without actual things, right? So he also claimed that the likelihood of this happening so perfectly is one in trillions of trillions of trillions. Okay, so what he was saying is that the entire universe is unlikely. So you can't say that life could have sprouted up anywhere in the universe because so he was trying to, outflank them this way. Okay. But then when they heard that, they came up with the multiverse theory. It's not necessarily came up with it afterwards, but it became more popular, where they said there can be an infinite amount of universes with different attempts at making with different physics and different constants, and one of them worked, right? Now, what would you say against this? It sounds crazy. What do you mean one of them worked? Why would you'd say what if you look at probability, pure probability, if you say that we're here on Earth, and then you say that maybe somewhere in the universe or the multiverse, something worked, right? What does that have to do with us? Why would it happen here? What are the chances of infinite amount of places for it to happen that it happened right here next to us? The chances are impossible, right? Well, that's when they come with their anthropic principle and they say, well, you're alive. And if you're alive, you have to be where life sprouted up. So you can't say it's impossible or improbable that we're there because you're alive. And this was basically the proof that kept the atheists afloat, even though we had so many good proofs that that's so unlikely that life would come up. They say that with this principle, they say that's what they'd stick to and say that um, you have to prove that it's unlikely to happen anywhere in the universe or the multiverse. And, you know, and that was good enough for them. Now, there are people that try to argue and press the point that, the multiverse, you have no proof that it exists and it's just a far-fetched idea and it doesn't make any sense, which is all true. But when we come with them with a proof saying there's a 1 in a billion chance, they'd say mathematically it's not 1 in a billion. Mathematically, since you have a lot of options of it happening anywhere, you don't really know what the probability is because you don't know how big the universe is, so you can't really give it a number. So we never had a definitive, real proof. And people would say, well, it's impossible to prove God, right? You'd say, how can you prove something? How can, And that was basically the argument until now. Okay. Until now. And this is what a book that I have written in the past year. Okay. I don't know if how many of you have read it and understood it yet, but let me explain to you what the difference with this book is to all the other proofs. What I found here is a proof that's not based on something improbable that has to do with life. I didn't say that life is complex and we wouldn't exist without this and this and this happening. And look what a beautiful world we have that everything works out perfectly. That's called the fine-tuned universe proof. Fine-tuned universe proof they has a problem with what's called the anthropic principle. This is what they say is that just because it's improbable here doesn't mean it's improbable in the entire universe. You have to take that all into consideration. So instead of just breaking my head like everyone else, trying to find things that are more and more improbable in this universe that have to do with life sprouting up, I found something else which is unlikely that has nothing to do with life sprouting up. It doesn't enable life. It doesn't, it doesn't make life more likely to exist. It doesn't make life more efficient. Okay. And what did I find? Well, here it's not so easy as saying, look at me, I'm alive, I'm so complex, I have eyes, I have a working brain, I have a heart. Those are things everyone sees. Everyone, that's why these proofs are so common and so much used because they're so simple to show people. But they're not good enough for the scientists who are atheists. They are stuck with their anthropic principle. So you need to show them, you need to look for something that's not likely, very, very, very unlikely. It has to be so unlikely that it's unlikely to be here in the entire Earth and solar system. and it has nothing to do with life. So, does anyone have any ideas of anything they've seen similar to that? Most people would call these things a miracle, right? You see a burning bush, what is it called? A miracle. Does it happen usually? No, it's very unlikely, right? Let's say you have the 10 plagues in Egypt. Yeah, in the beginning, you could say it's by chance. Okay, blood. Yeah, maybe the water turned red somehow, right? Right. When they have frogs, okay, some trick. Someone put out some good smelling frog food. I don't know. Something happened, right? Lice. Okay, this is starting to get fishy, right? Actually, when they had lice, they admitted that it has to be God, right? So what are these things? These things are a series of things that are improbable. What makes them especially improbable is that they were declared ahead of time by Moshe and then they happened. So you have within a certain short amount of time they showed up after you said that would happen, right? That makes the probability even smaller. And then a series of things until you had all the 10 plagues. You had Kriyas Yamsuf, open miracles, Kriyas Yamsuf. You had these miracles that are not probable to happen. But we haven't had miracles like these that are open and everyone can see them for thousands of years. And when we have miracles nowadays, it's usually only an individual sees them, only an individual experiences them. And then when he says it to other people, they say, I don't believe you. And he has no way to prove it. There's other miracles where people say, what are the chances that we won the war, the 6 Day War? That, yes, those are also, but that doesn't prove it to the atheists. They say, yeah, somehow it happened, you got lucky, because it's not a, it's, these are miracles which are dressed up in nature. And then you have the other miracles, the miracle of life, the miracle that the fine-tuned universe, you have all that, but they also don't accept it. So most people just gave up in trying to prove it, right? Or even looking to show the miracles. Some people keep trying, but they don't accept it. But now this has changed, okay? And I'd say it was beginning to change with some of the proofs. I'll just show you one proof that actually was known, one of the only things that was known that's similar to my proof that I didn't discover myself. It was already quite well known. And we're going to look at it now. Okay. You see on the screen, these are all the planets. There's Jupiter, Saturn, the big ones, right? You have the small ones. At the edges, you have the Earth and Moon. And the actual sizes of the planets are the real ratios, right? This is how much Jupiter is bigger than Earth, right? How small the moon is compared to the other planets. And then the distance between Earth and the moon is also the right ratio. And what do you see is that if you take all the planets and fit them between the Earth and the moon, they fit in, okay? They fit perfectly. Now, if you notice, look at the planets, they're tilted 45 degrees. Planets, when they spin, they're a little bit like pancakey. They're a little bit shorter and fatter because they're spinning around. Okay, so if you want to take the size of them, if you take them side by side, it's not the real size. That's the wide size. If you take them from the top to the bottom to measure it that way, that's the shorter size. If you turn them 45 degrees, you're getting the average size. So if you take all the planets, you turn them on 45 degrees, put them next to each other, touching each other, they fit exactly between the distance between the Earth and the Moon. You want to know the exact? The distance between the Earth and the Moon when you do the average, because it's elliptical, so you take the greatest value and the smallest value and you average it. It's 384,000 kilometers. Now you take all the average distance width or diameters of the planets. It's 384,475 kilometers. That's a difference of 475 kilometers. That's very little. If you want to do a fraction of it, it's 1 in 800. The difference is 1 in 800. It's super, super accurate. Okay. That means if you had all of these to scale in a room, the difference of overlap would be about a millimeter. Okay, it's super, super accurate. Okay, why is this a very good proof? Because in order for life to exist on Earth, it doesn't matter if the planets fit perfectly in the space between the moon and the Earth. Okay? Doesn't matter. It doesn't influence or enable life to happen on Earth. So this is an example of the first time you see something that's unlikely, very uncanny, very miraculous, but you can't say the anthropic principle. You cannot say, well, this would happen somewhere in the universe. Yeah, it might even happen, in one in every 800 solar systems, and there's billions of them. It could be this happens millions of times throughout the universe. But the thing is, the chances of it happening here in our solar system next to us where we see it is only 1 in 800. So the probability of it happening is exactly 1 in 800. You can't say it's since it's happening all over the universe, so it's probable. No, that's not the way probability works. And here's a very important thing to understand, and it's probably something that you're having trouble understanding. Okay? Let me explain it to you in another way. What are the chances of you standing outside and getting struck by lightning? 1 in 25,000, whatever it is. What are the chances of somebody in the world getting struck by lightning? Happens all the time. I mean, not all the time, but it happens a lot, right? It happens a lot more. There's 8 billion people in the world. It's 8 billion times more likely that somebody somewhere in the world will get struck by lightning. So if you say, what are the chances of lightning striking somebody on Earth? That's very different than saying, what are the chances of you right now getting struck by lightning? Completely different. 8 billion times different. Okay. Now, let's say you say, since somebody is getting struck by lightning, um, and therefore it must be you. Doesn't make any sense, right? That would be like trying to apply the anthropic principle to this proof, to saying since there's lots of galaxies and stars out there, so therefore this is likely. Okay, I'm trying to explain it. You're going to have to think about it, but this is the difference. When you're trying to prove what's the chances of life sprouting up, they can say that wherever life sprouted up, that's where you happen to be. So if life happened to sprout up here on Earth, out of the whole universe, you are here. You can't ask why you're here because you had to be here. The difference is over here with these planets lining up, you didn't have to be near these planets lining up. So it's unlikely that you happen to be here. Okay? That's the difference. And now that's the difference between my proof and all the other proofs. All the other proofs are proofs of over and over again. Look at the human body, it's so unlikely. Why did life sprout up? Evolution is unlikely, all those things, and they always say the anthropic principle. It could have happened somewhere. Once you prove them something that doesn't have to do with life, they don't have that. And then they have to admit that it's unlikely. Okay? And that's when they are stuck and they have to admit that God exists. So you can say, why didn't they admit when they saw these planets lined up? Why didn't they admit that God exists? And the answer is because like I showed here, the likelihood of it happening is still proven to be about 1 in 800, but 1 in 800 is not enough for them to convince them that God exists. 1 in 800 is, yes, very, very nice, but not quite enough. It's getting there, but it's not quite enough. Okay? Now, bring other proofs like this, like the ones of the planets fitting in. Why don't you bring other proofs? Well, there aren't any. There aren't any others. You see, miracles aren't easy to come by. The miracle of life is very easy to come by. We see it all the time, but then doesn't work against the anthropic principle. Miracles like this that have nothing to do with the probability of life sprouting up and can actually prove God, well, there's only this one. That's all there is. There's nothing else. There aren't any others. Okay, until I came up with my proof. And here's some things that I found. Let's start with this easy one. If you take the moon and the earth and you do a ratio between the sizes, okay? You stack them up like a snowman. The ratio between them is 4 over pi, okay? Pi is 3.14, right? It's you know what pi is. 4 over pi is the ratio of the Earth's diameter over the Earth's diameter plus the moon's diameter. Now, what's interesting is the accuracy is 99.99. That's like the accuracy is so accurate. It's like unbelievable, 1 in 10,000th. Absolutely accurate. It's really showing you that God is doing this on purpose. Okay? This I figured out on my own. Um, but would this alone convince atheists to be religious? No, it's just like just one thing. You don't have more. Okay, so I had to find some more. Look what I found here. The distance from the Earth to the moon is 4 over pi light seconds. Light seconds is the distance that light travels in a second. Again, 4 over pi, also to very high accuracy. This is getting a little bit weird, right? Why is it so accurate? Okay, 4 over pi both has to do with the Earth and the moon, but in completely different things. One is the ratio of diameters, and the other is in light seconds. Light, the speed of light. What's that relation here? How does that pop up? Now, if you say this to a atheist, he'll say coincidence, not good enough. But then remember, the distance between of the planets all lined up is also the distance between the moon to the Earth, which is also 4 over pi, which is light seconds. Okay, now this is getting a little bit weird. We have three things. All of them are the same 4 over pi. Now you show this to people and they're like, wow, that's amazing. Show it to an atheist. It's beginning to start to work. Not quite enough yet because I haven't shown the probability mathematically and to say I can prove from this that the chance of this being created on its own or created by somebody is, 1 billion to 1. I wasn't able to do the math very easily and show that over here. But you're kind of getting the idea of the direction that I'm going. Okay? Um, Next. Until now, does anyone want to ask anything? Okay, so I'm going to keep going and then we'll keep the answers to the end. Okay? Okay, so what I've come up here, there's a whole story of how I got to it, right? But I've come up with mathematical proof of something similar to the stuff I was telling you about, the first three things. But this time I was able to do the probability with math and prove that the world was created. And I can prove it to a probability with real numbers and real math that there's only one chance that it came out this way on its own compared to 25 billion chances that somebody created it. Somebody or something created it this way on purpose. And I was able to show this mathematically. And this is the first ever proof that the world was created by a creator. I didn't yet prove who the creator is and what he wants from us, but this is the first step in the process of proving God, is to prove there's a creator, but proving it in an absolute solid way that there's no arguing with it. And the anthropic principle does not apply to this proof. The principle that they've used for hundreds of other proofs, to all the other proofs that came out until now, they're so used to using the anthropic principle that when I show them my proof, they automatically say, but there's the anthropic principle. And they're so used to saying it, not even knowing what the anthropic principle says. It says explicitly that it only works for the fine-tuned universe, for the chances of life sprouting up. It doesn't work for regular probabilities of regular things happening, of everything else. Okay? So the atheists that I've shown this to, they're in shock. They don't know what to do. They have nothing to say. And I've posted this on all of the atheist groups and all the science groups. None of them has come up with anything that they can answer this. Okay? When I show them that the anthropic principle doesn't work against my proof, they're silent. That's it. There's the end of the conversation. They have nothing left to say. Okay. Maybe I'll start off from the beginning, the way I started off, the logic behind this. Don't think that this is simple. What I'm showing you right now is just building up to the proof. It's not the actual proof. So it's just what gets you thinking in this direction, how I started thinking about this. So if you look at the moon and the sun, there is an argument that says, look, they have the same apparent size. During an eclipse, it covers each other. The moon covers the sun perfectly, and that seems unlikely. I tried to do the math and see how unlikely. It's unlikely, but when I checked it, it's only about 1 in 1,000 chance. Again, when you're trying to tell the atheist 1 in 1,000 chance, that's not good enough for them. Yet when you give them a proof that's 1 in 25 billion, 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 that's good enough for them. Okay? And there's reasons for it. But this is good enough for them. This is, you consider it absolute proof. Now, also, when I was trying to prove that the lunar eclipse is perfect and it's, you know, and I can show that's 1 in 1,000, the math wasn't so convincing. Even though I can show it's about 1 in 1,000, it's using statistics, it's using guesswork. It's not really so good. Okay? Wasn't good enough. But what I said is, look, if Hashem did this and he can do anything, he can do more. Now, if I want to prove something with probability, it's not enough to have just one thing. You have to have a whole bunch of things to show that all of them work. Hashem can make all those things work. Let's just check and see what he did. So if you want to do a probability set, what you do is you try to make it as small as possible because otherwise the math is way too complex. But you also want to make it big enough to show that it's, that it works, that it's real. What I did is I took the dimensions of the sun, the moon, and the earth. It's quite obvious why. They're the biggest objects that we can see. Everything else, the planets and stars are very small. You have the sun, moon, and earth are big. Let's look at the ratios, just like we looked at the moon and the sun, right? The ratios are the same. I mean, Hashem is basically giving it away. I mean, it's so obvious. He gave the answer right away. You look at the moon and the sun, they cover each other up perfectly because the ratio between the distance and the ratio between the size is the same. That's just simple math, right? Now, what gets more interesting when you look into it is how much bigger than this is the sun than the moon, and the answer is very close to 400. How much further away is it from? How much further away is the sun from the earth than the moon to the earth? It's also very close to 400 times more difference. Okay, so not only the ratios are the same, which makes the lunar eclipse and solar eclipse possible, right? to be perfect and so perfect that you see the corona around the sun. When the moon covers the sun, you see around the sun there's like light, a crown of light that's not as bright, and you can only see it when the sun is covered. You can see the glowing halo around the sun. That's how perfect it is. Okay? But what is the number 400? Since I know gematria, if it's 400, it must there's a a lot of gematrias of 400. Hashem is playing around with gematrias here, showing us gematrias of 400. And he's showing it in something which is unlikely to happen. You know, it's about 1 in 1,000 to have a moon that's the perfect size and distance to make an eclipse, and it's a gematria of 400. What if he did it not just here? What if this ratio works also between the size of the Earth and the size of the sun, not just the moon and the sun, right? Okay. All you have to do is look up in Wikipedia, get a whole table of distances, get all these things, put it into an Excel spreadsheet, start looking at it, right? What do you find? You start finding things. The diameter of the Earth compared to the distance of the moon is about 30 times, a round number. Okay, velocities. Let's start doing velocities, the rotational time orbit. Okay, so you get about 100 times the velocity, the rotational, if you're on the Earth, you're spinning around in a circle around, you just go every day, you go around in a circle, you're going pretty fast. Like, I don't know, 1,000, how much is it? A few thousand kilometers an hour. Well, the moon also rotates and rotates once a month, because it goes around once a month and it rotates once a month. So it also has rotational speed. It's 100 times. I looked it up. I did the math. Very close, 100.5. Rotation, we know this. The moon and the Earth, the month is about 30 days. So it's close to 30. Okay, we're beginning to see things. Some other things you didn't know, that the sun rotates, has a very funny rotation. It's very fluid, but you do the average, and it rotates about once a month, like the moon, which doesn't have a physical connection, shouldn't be connected in any way. Okay, now the speed of light. I threw in the speed of light because I saw everything works, not only distance and size, and not only time of orbit and time of rotation and speed of orbit, speed of rotation. If everything works, let's throw in the speed of light and compare it to all the speeds. Because if Hashem wants to do this, he'll do it for the speed of light too, right? And what did I find? It works. The moon's orbital velocity is 1/300,000th of the speed of light. Again, the number 3. Again, multiples of 1, multiples of 3, multiples of 4. That means 1 or 10 or 100, right? Or you count them all as like one thing, right? 4, 40, 400, 4,000, 3, okay? Look what we got. We got all these things. Oh, the Earth orbits the sun at a speed, the orbital speed going around the sun is 1/10,000th of the speed of light. Now, it's not exactly 1/10,000th, and people will say, hey, it's not exact, so you can't prove anything wrong. You can prove. How do you prove? Well, it's more difficult. You prove why is it so close. Proving why it's so close doesn't work if you have just one thing. Because it has to be some speed, right? And they'll say it has to be some speed, it has to be some ratio, so it came out. Yeah, exactly. The first time you find something, it proves nothing. The second time you prove something that's in the same set, that shows an actual probability. And the third time, right? That means if you flip a coin and it shows up heads, it means nothing. It had to show up heads or tails. Unless you called it ahead of time and said it's going to be heads, it means nothing. If you called it ahead of time and said, okay, it's going to be heads, and then you have 50% chance of doing it, right? What if you don't call it ahead of time? You say, it's heads, or you say, it's tails. It means nothing, right? But whether you call it or not, if you get 2 heads in a row, well, that's 50%, 3 heads in a row. In a row, we're talking about the same person, the same place, in a row. Doesn't matter if you called it ahead of time. It's unlikely that he's going to get 100 times in a row all heads. Okay? So what's important here is the repetition. Okay. And if you have three dice that you're throwing out, the chances of them all coming out the same number, right? There's ways to do mathematical probability. Okay. Next, how do I prove just because I saw a few interesting things that we saw over here, how do I prove the probability of it and prove that it's not just by chance, not random? Well, for that we need math. And yes, it's possible to do. Okay. Over here, I explained to you how I do the math. First of all, this is showing you how I do the size of this moon and the size of the sun. The size of the sun, right, is 1.39 million kilometers, and the size of the moon in diameter is 3,400 kilometers. You divide one by the other and you get 400.5. Shows it's 400.5 times bigger. People sometimes say, what if you're using kilometers or you're using miles or you're using inches? It doesn't matter because when you divide two things, you get a ratio, and the ratio is a whole number, it has no units. It doesn't matter if it was kilometers. You have a 1.3 million miles divided by 3.4 thousand miles. It comes out to 400.5 without nothing to do with units. When you have, 1.3 million meters divided by 3,000 meters, let's say, it also comes out to 4.5. It doesn't matter what the units are. Okay, so these are all questions that people ask me, but they're just stupid questions. It's just obvious. These are units. I do division of the same units. It doesn't matter, if it's kilometers or inches. Okay. Now I'm going to do the probability. The first probability I want to know is, okay, this is a little bit complex math. We have it over here. I have the ratio 400.5. 400.5. Why do I say that it's improbable to be close to a round number of 400? So the way to do the odds is you take 400 and you say close to being a round number is 400. What's far away from being the round number is 450 or 350. But since it's 400.5, the 400.5, we can see here this little arrow, it says 400.5. It's between 400 and 450. What's it closer to? It's closer to 400. How much closer is it to 400 compared to 450? Well, it's half, it's 0.5 distance from 400, and it's 49.5 distance from 450. You divide 0.5 divided by 49.5, you get 99. The odds are 1 in 99 that it's so close. Okay? Now, if you have just this, it means nothing because the number had to fall somewhere. And things are randomly, and you say, oh, wow, it's close. Yeah, unless you called it ahead of time. You could sort of make the argument and say, well, round numbers are called ahead of time in a way. You can do that. But I'm not relying on that. What I'm doing then is I'm taking the distance, and that's, 390, right? That's also closer to 400, right? The odds aren't so great. It's only 1 in 4. But then what you do here's how you do probability. You multiply them together. Okay? The probability of two unrelated things happening at the same time is a multiplication of their probabilities. Those are the rules of probability. You see, take 99, multiply by 4, and you get the chances of both these things happening are 1 in 396. Okay? Fine. So I was able to prove, let's say for the sun and the moon, to have these odds that they're close to the number 400. It's 1 in 396. That's not good enough to prove to an atheist that God exists. So what do? Here we have the next picture. I take a set. I build a probability set. I say, look, I'm going to take all of the sizes and distances of the sun, moon, and earth. I'm going to get 8 ratios, and I'm going to see if if all 8 of them end up closer to round numbers than to non-round numbers. Okay? Let's see what happens. I already know I'm ahead of the game. I got 400.5. I have 390. They're close. Let's see the rest of them. Now, you tell me, should this happen? Should this work out the way I want it to? No, absolutely not. The chances are almost zero that they'll all be round numbers, right? Or even that most of them will be round numbers. It's just very unlikely. Why? This is just completely random. What do I think I'm doing here? Why would you think you'd find anything? And the answer is I wouldn't think that I'd find anything. I know what I'm going to find something because I know the way God works and what he's going to do and how he runs the world. He's going to show us something here. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother looking. There's no chance that I'd find anything here. Absolutely no chance. If you show this to a scientist and say, I'm going to do this, he says, yeah, go have fun. No chance that you're going to find anything. We know from experience that the world is random. That's not how it works. There's no correlation between round numbers like 1, 10, 100, or 300, or even 600 or 700. There's no correlation between the decimal system of 10 numbers to the way nature works. Nature is flowing. Nature is random. Nature, it has no connection. It's not a computer game, right? Where everything goes in 10 times or 100 times. It doesn't work that way. So they're going to say it's random. And then since they say that it's random, I'm able to say if I find something that shows that they're all very close to round numbers, I can show the exact probability that this is unlikely. Okay? So we have here, we have the sun, we have the moon, we have all the distance. And not only am I doing the ratios of the sizes and the ratios of the distances, but also the ratios of the sizes and the distances together. That means the size of the Earth compared to the distance to the sun, the size of the Earth, right? The size of the sun compared to the distance to the Earth. Okay, I have 8 different ratios. And what do I see on this graph? I make a graph where I take 1 is representing 1 and 10 and 100 and 1,000, right? 2 is 2 and 20 and 200. And I plot these numbers. 30.15 goes to 3.015. Okay, that's this one over here, this green dot. I plot them all over here. And what do I see? I see something strange. Not only are they close to the center, close to round numbers, they're only close to 3 specific round numbers, 1, 3, and 4. So I found something new here, which also shouldn't happen. Randomly, why should they cluster around 1, 3, and 4? Okay, so I now have 2 calculations of probability. If you look at this box where somebody's throwing into a box with 10 boxes inside and he throws a ball in, the first ball has to land somewhere. You don't count that. The second ball, well, if it falls into the same box, you can say that's unlikely. And if like 4 balls fall into the same box, it's unlikely. We have over here 8 balls, they fell into 3 boxes. You can do the math. The first 3 don't count because the first 3 just randomly fell into a box. You only start counting when they repeatedly fall in the same box. So we have not 8 ratios, but we have 5 ratios that we're counting. And what do we got? For technical reasons, it's not 0.3, but it's 0.333 because it's really 9 available boxes, but we're not going to go into that. So it's 1/3 times 1/3 times 1/3 5 times. It's 1 in 243. Is that enough to prove it? No, it's not enough to prove to an atheist that God exists, but we're beginning to get there. But there's another thing that I did. I calculated the chances of all of these numbers being close to round numbers. That means it doesn't mean 1, 3, or 4, but any multiple of 10 or 20 or 30 or 300 or 400, they're close. And what happened here? What happened here is I did, just like I did, 99 and 4, I did the sun and the distance to the moon. I did it for all the others. They were also close. right? Except for one of them. This one that gives 0.5, that was one that was closer to a non-round number than to a round number. It was closer to like 4.5 rather than to 4. All the others, though, are are very close to round numbers. Now, when you multiply to them together, so these are all big numbers. This 0.5 brings the probability down a little bit, right? It counteracts these others, but it comes out to just about exactly 1 in a million chance. That means that these 8 ratios being close to round numbers is 1 in a million chance. When you do the math, you took a box, you put inside the box the sun, moon, and earth, and you said, this is my probability set. I'm taking all the measurements of distance and the measurements of diameter. I'm dividing them by each other, and I'm going to see what happens. And look what happened. 1 in a million. Now this number is big enough to prove to an atheist that the world was created. 1 in a million. You also multiply it by the 1 in 243, and you get 1 in 243 million. That means that the certainty that you can say that this system of sun, moon, and earth was created on purpose by somebody or something, okay, is 243 million times more likely than it happened on its own by chance. There's only one chance in 243 million that this happened by chance. Now, this is a real number, okay? Now, 243 million is a lot more than 1 in 800. This, you can say to an atheist, is absolute proof of God. And he has to accept it. A mathematician, a scientist has to accept it. There's no argument against it. What they tried to do is automatically say, but the anthropic principle, it could have happened anywhere in the world. And the answer is the anthropic principle does not work against this because these ratios are just, it's a code of 1, 3, and 4. It's not life sprouting up. It means you can't say that we had to be at the solar system that has these dimensions. And we wouldn't be able to survive in any other solar system with slightly different dimensions. Okay? The amount that you change these dimensions in order to mess up my probability equation, you only change them a tiny fraction and the whole thing's messed up. If you change the distance between the moon and the earth a little bit, it does not make life more probable or less probable. But if you change the distance between the earth and the moon even 12%, or the size of the moon, change it by 12%, which is not a lot, it won't change the probability of life occurring on earth, but it completely destroys my entire thing. It won't be it won't be a 1 in a million, or one, it won't happen. Okay. So this is the first proof ever, okay, ever in the history of the world where it's absolute proof that God exists. And it just came out now. I just proved it. And most people in the world don't know about it yet. Hasn't gotten out yet. I just printed this little booklet just now. So you are some of the first people to see it. I wouldn't say you're the only people to see it. I have already distributed about 8,000 booklets in Hebrew and English. I got it also in Portuguese, and online I also have it in Dutch, and we're working on many other languages. But what are we looking at? We're looking at something that's going to absolutely change the world. That means until now we had to rely on trying to convince people that God exists with lots of arguments, but we had no absolute proof. When you have absolute proof, it's a whole different game. This is what people like Gerald Schroeder were trying to do. Aisha was trying to do this. Root was trying to do this. They succeeded a little bit, but nothing compared to this. Actually, you'd say they did not succeed because the atheists still remained atheists after they heard their proofs. But this one This one's different. So we don't know what's going to happen to the world after this happens, how the world is going to change. You have no way of measuring this. This has never happened before. Um, but what we can control is how fast this will get to the world. The more we put in effort into getting this out and getting this to the right people to get it out to the whole world, will make the world change quicker. Okay? Now, this, if you notice, was just the sizes and distances. Didn't I mention time before? There's a whole aspect of time. Does this work when I start throwing in not just distance and size? Does this work when I throw in time? The time of the orbit, the time period of rotation, the speed. And what about the speed of light? Throw it in. And here's the table. 29 different ratios. You have the sizes, but you also have the time right here. And then you also have the speed of light. The speed of light divided by the sun's average rotational speed. There should not be any physical connection between these numbers. It makes no sense to divide them by each other. Every mathematician says this is crazy. It makes no sense. What are you trying to prove? You can't. And the answer is, I am not trying to prove a new law of physics, a new law of nature, a new thing that happens everywhere. No, this happens absolutely nowhere ever. If you start dividing random things, right? The height of a wave, and you divide it by the height of another wave, you're not going to see that it's, that the ratio comes out to a round number. It doesn't happen in nature, what I'm showing you, ever. This never happens. It happens only here in the sun, moon, and earth. And this is an exception. And what is an exception is, by definition, a miracle. What is a miracle? A miracle is something that's unlikely to happen, and it happens anyways. The more unlikely that it is to happen, the more of a miracle it is. The more things that you have that are aligned together that are unlikely, the more unlikely it is. That means the chances of frogs coming to Egypt is, let's say, 1 in a million. The chances of frogs and lice coming to Egypt is 1 in a million, right? The chances of frogs and lice, you're getting the idea, okay? So when you have something that's super improbable, there comes to a point when they say, okay, I give up. It's a miracle. It proves that God exists. Okay? Now, people look at this and they say, I don't understand it. It's not that they don't understand it. It's very simple. There's a distance divided by a distance. You have this. There's nothing not to understand here. What they're saying is, I can't believe it. I can't believe my eyes. So the answer is, look again. It's right there on the table. Read it again. Pinch yourself. Make sure you're not dreaming. Okay? It's right here. What you're looking at is the first miracle that's been open miracle that anybody has been able to see, that not anybody personally, but that the world, everyone in the world, anyone in the world can see this, right? With their own physical eyes, they can see a miracle. It's right here. The only difference is that you need to put in about an hour of time. And you have to look at the math. So there's a little bit of difficulty and hiddenness here. But if anybody in the world can put in an hour, and then they can know for certainty, absolute certainty, there's no counter arguments against this, absolute certainty that the world was created by somebody or something. Okay? Now, what do we have here? We have a table with all of these 29 different ratios of speed, time, speed of light, size, anything that's in the same units I could divide by each other and get a pure number. I put the numbers here so you can easily check all of these things. They're very accurate. They're on Wikipedia or NASA or wherever you look. You can verify that these numbers are correct. The ratio, I make all the ratios down to 1 point something, like, or 3 point something. That means I make 1 and 10 and 100 all as one thing. You can see in this table already over here that they're all divided either into ones, one meaning from 0.5 to 1.5. Okay. Technically, it can't be less than 1, so it's always from 1 to 1.5. Now here we got threes. Threes can be anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5. And then we have the fours. The fours are anyways between 3.5 to 4.5. None of these 29 go out of those boundaries. They don't go out of the boundaries of 1, 3, or 5. 1, 3, or 4. I did the math, right? If you have 29 of them, you don't count the first 3. So you have only 26, but one third times 1/3 times 1/3, 26 times is exactly, the chances of this happening is exactly 1 in 2.54865,828,329, right? A million. It's a million times a million. That's the chances of this happening. Okay, it's very simple math, right? If you want to see the guy with the box, we have that down here. If somebody had, you can see this visually. This guy's throwing balls into this box. This box has 10 boxes inside of it. And by chance, completely randomly, all 29 balls fall into only 3 boxes. It doesn't matter if it's 1, 3, or 4 different ones. The number doesn't matter. What matters is that none of the balls fell out of those 3 boxes and went to other boxes. You can see that. If you'd see this, you'd say it's not probable. You can also do the math very easily of how improbable it is. That's exactly what we got here. If you want to see our graph, this is the graph of all the 29 points. Below it is a graph of how it should look if it was random. It would be scattered all over the place. What you're looking at now is completely mathematical. These are the ratios. And you can see that they're completely lined up here. Okay, this is proof of God. Okay, people will try to say there must be some reason that makes it this way. Gravity, vibrations. They'll say that, but that's very nice to say that. But what is gravity and harmonic, resonance? What does it have to do with the speed of light divided by the moon's rotational speed? Right? What does it have to do with, the diameter of the moon compared to the diameter of the sun? It doesn't, there may be one thing over here that you might try to explain by harmonic vibrations, maybe one, and if you just take it out of the equation, it doesn't make any difference really in the math, right? Basically, you'd have to just to each one of these 29 things show that there's some reason for it. And these are things which, according to science, should be completely unrelated. Okay? So there's no way to show that. There's no way to disprove this. Okay? This is absolutely proof of God. Okay? Here we can see another picture. This picture over here is very tedious. I put this all together myself. It's representing the sun, moon, and earth. Each one is a different ratio. The size compared to the size, the distance compared to the distance, the time of rotation compared to the time of rotation, or the time period, or the velocity, or the speed of light. All 29 are pictured here in diagrams, so you can actually look at them. If you blow it up and see it in large, you'll see each one is another ratio, and all of them are pointing to the dots where they're on the graph, where they are close to 1, 3, and 4. Okay? So this is the first stage. We do the math just like I did the math for those 8 ratios to get in 1 in 200 and about 250 million. I do it this time. And instead of, you know, if you'd add more random things, it should cancel out and be random. It shouldn't be close to round numbers. Shouldn't, right? But they don't. They just multiply instead. So we get the chance, the probability of them being close to round numbers is 1 in 10 million billion, that they're close to round numbers. This is the math. These are all the math is right here. Anyone can check it. If anybody finds one mistake in my math, right, then you can prove me wrong. So far, nobody has been able to find one mistake in my math. Okay? Now, you multiply it by the chances of 25 billion. Here's just a little typo. Okay, the autocorrect made this into made the two too small over here, but it's 1 over 2.5 million. You multiply that by 10 million billion, and you get one chance in 25 billion, which is more than the stars in the universe. We have here, this is probability is equal to the chance of winning the grand prize in the Powerball lottery and then being struck by lightning within 2 hours of winning and then surviving and then dying from a bee sting after 2 hours. I did that math also. Okay, so it's showing that the probability that there's a creator is 99.999999999999999%. Mathematically, it's not that I'm making this up. I did all the math. This is what we did until now. This is the proof that there is a creator. We don't yet know who he is, what he wants from us, but we do know for a fact, a scientific fact that's irrefutable. There's no denying this anymore. Somebody created the world. Okay? This has never happened before. Now, you can, if anyone wants to speak up quick and ask a question, you can do that now because we finished this section. This is the most important section. This part that I just explained to you now, on its own, is the one and only proof that exists, and it's more than we need. You don't need more than this to prove that the world was created by God. No reason. You don't need anything else. You don't need to argue after this. You don't need anything in addition to this. We can end the book here. Okay? Because this is what's actually going to change the world. This and this alone. The previous ones that I said with the planets and that, they're nice, but they're not necessary for this. Okay? Anybody want to speak up? Or I'm going to go into the next part. Because the next part is where it gets fun and interesting. Okay? After we know for a fact that the world was created by God, well, we know it was created by somebody. Now the question that everyone asks, they ask a few questions. Who created it? And the other thing that everyone asking is, what does this number 1, 3, and 4 mean? You see, what happened is we just proved that any 3 numbers, right? We just proved that the chances of it not being in the 7 other places is what makes it special. The being close to round numbers, any round numbers is special. But what came out of here was the numbers 1, 3, and 4. So if we know that somebody created the world this way on purpose, we have to ask, why did he decide to write basically a code that says 1, 3, and 4? What does 1, 3, and 4 mean? Obviously, he's telling us something. Otherwise, why did he do this? Obviously, he did it to tell us something. Okay? So now I can say, look, I don't know what he's trying to tell us, or even if he's trying to tell us. Maybe he just, Stamose chose those numbers. But we know that he chose those, that we know that he did it. We just don't know why. I don't need to know why in order to know that he exists. All I need to know is that he made this way. It's improbable that it happened by chance. That why he chose 1, 3, and 4, it could be that I'll never know, but that doesn't mean anything. I still know that God created, I know that somebody created the world. Me not knowing what the 1, 3, and 4 means doesn't disprove or I don't need to know why he did it in order to know that he exists. Okay? Hope that's clear. This proof doesn't depend on what I'm going to be telling you from now on, later on. I can just suggest to you what I think that this might mean because, an atheist never learned about God, never learned Kabbalah, never learned gematrias, never learned anything. He doesn't know anything. People who have been learning, well, we know what the Creator says to us. We can help you out a little bit and give you an explanation. Again, don't confuse this with the proof. The proof already proved. Right? It proved there's a Creator. And I'm not even really claiming that this is what I'm going to be telling you of these gematrias is proof that the Creator is specifically Hashem. It is a proof, but I didn't work out, the probability and the math like I did in the other one. It's more difficult to prove this second part. Okay? So you really want to keep these parts separate because if you mix them, people are going to get confused and say you didn't prove the first part because the second part they don't understand. Make a hard line over here and say, we proved there's a creator. End of book. Next book. Okay, let's try to talk about what he's telling us. So 1, 3, and 4 in small gematria is Shin Daled Yud, name of Hashem. It's also, if you do the regular gematrias, Shin Daled Yud is 314, which is again 314. And now let's explain what's going on here. Where do we see Shin Daled Yud in the Torah? It says Yaakov Avinu is praying, end enough to my troubles. So there's a midrash, right? And the midrash says that in the beginning, God created the world, and the heaven and earth were being stretched and extended until God said, enough. That means what happened is the universe, he was creating the universe, was expanding, okay? And then he said, enough, this is the size I want, okay? And then what happened? It stopped. And what we got of the dimensions and everything that we see today, the size of the moon, size of the earth, right? This is the size that he wanted. He wanted this exact size. And then it says in the Midrash, therefore it is written, Vikel Shakai, using the name, and then and then the Midrash also says, in Rashi it says actually, Yaakov was praying to God, the God who told the world enough will say to my troubles enough. So what we see, as it said, like it says, and Hashem Shakai. Okay, so what is it saying here? And she dai is that means she amar leolamai dai. Dai is enough. She is that. That enough is the letters Shin Daled Yud of God's name Shakai. So and that's 314. So we see there's a connection between the dimensions that God created the world to 314, to his name Shin Daled Yud, and we see that over here. Okay, so now we're beginning to understand a little bit what's going on. Why did God do it this way? What is next? God, if you spell God, pronounced in English, but with Hebrew letters, is Gimel Aleph Dalid, which is the third letter, the first letter, and the fourth letter. It's again 314. Okay? What does it mean? It means that this teaching is supposed to be not just for us Jews. This teaching is for the whole world. The scientific language that the whole world uses is English. That means when when a Chinese scientist speaks with a Japanese scientist, they speak in English. Okay? That's the universal scientific language. So he gave us this both in English and in Hebrew. I have some more gematrias where I'm correlating between Gimel Aleph Daled 314 and Yud K Vav K. If you square them, it comes out to 26, just the same. And some more gematrias. And since then, I've been shown some more gematrias. Rav Ginsburg has said some gematrias, and it goes on and on. Okay? And then it goes back to what I showed you before. Remember what I said 4 over pi? Pi is the difference, is like the ratio between the diameter of a circle and a circle. Well, 4 over pi, which is 314, pi is 3.14. It goes on, but if you round it, it comes out to 3.314, which is like Shin Daled Yud, which is 3, 1, and 4. It goes back, I found this thing was pi over 4 over pi, 4 over pi, and 4 over pi. So it's a nice circle that it comes to, that we have all of these proofs all together with 3.14. Now, what did we prove here so far? Basically, we showed with gematrias that we're talking, who is the creator? Who is the creator? What is he? Shin Daled Yud. It's God. Okay? That alone, trying to show this on its own with gematrias, they say, what? You can't prove it. It's not a mathematical proof. It's not a real proof. And they're right. That's not a real proof. But once you already proved that God exists, that somebody created the world. You see, I'm not using this gematria of 314 and Shin Daled Yud to prove that God created the world, that somebody, I'm not trying to prove that somebody created the world. I already proved that already. I don't need to prove it again with this. Once it's a fact and it's established that the world was created and not random, now this can be used as a proof to try to show people who God is. Because you don't have many options about who God is, who created the world. Okay? So I don't need to bring a very strong mathematical proof about who God is. I need to bring a strong mathematical proof about that there is a creator. Okay? Okay. Let's say we know who God is. How do we know that God wants us to do mitzvahs? How do you prove that? Right? Which mitzvahs? There's many religions, right? There's other religions. Well, I didn't stop there. I have another proof. So this is a proof that I made myself. I found it in the Gemara Brachot. If you read the Gemara Brachot on page 58, it makes no sense. And they used to call this an agadita, and they'd skip it because they didn't understand it. Okay? Or they just read it really quick, but they never try to understand it. And when Schottenstein and Steinsaltz tried to write it down and translate it, they just wrote down that what they're talking about is zodiac signs and, clusters of stars, and, basically that's what they're talking about. Some sort of agadita. Nobody understood it. Nobody cared. Okay, I read it and I figured out what the shot of the Gemara is. Okay, so the Gemara was talking about asteroid belts and meteors and naming and describing each one of the asteroid belts. There's the main asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. There's the Kuiper belt beyond Neptune, right? Those are belts of asteroids. You can see it over here. You can see like a big, thick, white donut. It's around most of the planets, okay? It's around the sun and Earth and Mars, but Jupiter is outside of it, okay? Now, aside from that, Jupiter has its own asteroid belt in the same orbit ahead of it, and behind it, you have clumps of asteroids. Now, asteroids in the asteroid belts they're just a bunch of smallish rocks very far away. You can't see them without So even telescopes really can't see them very well. Um, so to know that there are asteroid belts with, millions of asteroids in them, we didn't know this until, about 100 years ago or something like that. Um, so how did they know about this in the Gemara 2,000 years ago? There's no way to know. And the answer is in the Gemara, it says Gemiri. Gemiri means, what does Gemiri mean? It means this is from Mount Sinai. It's it's scientific knowledge that they couldn't have known, and the only way they knew it is because when God taught Moses on Mount Sinai, he taught him the oral Torah, not just the written Torah. It was just handed down orally from generation to generation. And when he did teach him the oral Torah at the same time, he taught him quite a few things about science and nature that nobody could have known. And it was passed down from generation to generation together with the oral Torah and written in the Talmud. Now, in the Talmud, when they wrote it down, the rabbis who wrote it down understood what it was saying. But when they wrote it down and in the Gullus, um, people were trying to read it. They okay. When people were trying to read it, they didn't understand it. They misunderstood it. They understood it as like zodiac signs or something, right? And but now modern science came along, and I know modern science. I was able to say, hey, this is talking about the asteroid belts and the asteroids, and it fits in perfectly. Okay, and we can go into it. But the point is, what do I have here? I have proof that the oral Torah was given on Mount Sinai because this in the Talmud is written this scientific thing that they couldn't have known otherwise, but they knew it. That means it was given to God on Mount Sinai. Now, this proof alone to prove that God exists is a little bit hard. But once I already proved that there is a creator, and I proved that with my first main proof, I proved there is a creator. End of story. No arguing with it anymore. Once that's established, and then I show them this proof, now I can say, hey, now you want to know what God, the creator, wants from us? We have it written in the oral Torah. That means you need not only to know that God exists, who he is, but what he wants from us. And he wants us to keep the laws of the Torah. And for non-Jews, they have to keep the 7 Noahide laws that we Jews also were taught all the details about the 7 Noahide laws on Mount Sinai to Moshe, to Moses. He taught it, we remembered it, we wrote it down, we brought it from generation to generation, and we have the code of law of the 7 Noahide laws that all the non-Jews have to keep. So here we have finally the complete proof of everything. Solid. This has never happened before. Nothing like this. Here's just another nice proof in addition with the speed of light. It's just a beautiful proof. It also adds to it, but really unnecessary after we already gave all our other proofs. Now, what do we have? We have a section with questions and answers. Okay. Lots of questions and lots of answers. Everyone's asking questions. They don't like this. This is ruining their life, completely ruining their life. They are forced now to change, not only as individuals. This forces society to change. This is now scientific proof that they're going to have to change all the laws in all of the country, in all of the world. That's the way the world works. Okay? And this is going to have to happen. And if some people don't like it, they're going to be outvoted by the majority of people who do like it. Okay? So this is going to absolutely change the world for the better.